Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Butch Shorak, Options University. It's Friday, October 19th, 2012. Access to this video is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing contained in this video, website, or promotional material constitutes a promotion, recommendation, solicitation, or offer of any particular investment, security, transaction. Options University provides educational services that are meant to teach you the risks and rewards of trading stocks and options. We are not a service that tells you what to trade. We're not implying or guaranteeing any profit, and as always, do not trade with money that you cannot afford to lose. Well, on a happy Friday morning, we see that we had some interesting news today out of jobless claims as they disappointed slightly. And then, of course, what happened was that we saw last week's be downgraded much more than what we originally thought they were going to be. So it was a week that provided for us not a whole lot of movement out of our economic announcements. And so let's take a look at what really counted, and that is the week that was interested in earnings, and nothing more obvious as it was on Thursday. So taking a look, we had a nice little rally going into the week. We got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and we got a little toppy here on Thursday as we hit that resistance line of 1464. Overall, if we look at our trend, we said that we are still in a sideways trend. We're spending time above the moving average and below the moving average. We're in an upcycle as we had higher highs, higher low until we got to Thursday. When Thursday we had a higher high and a lower low and what looks like might be a topping candlestick. Now what we'll do is we'll watch carefully for tomorrow, and let's take a look at this with a little more detail, and we'll go on down. Here's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That looks bullish, bullish, bullish. And then finally, not so bullish. We got our candlestick that looks like a potential topping where we had an outside day with a higher high and a lower low. So what we'll look for tomorrow is we'll look for lower lows and lower highs as we go into the weekend, coming back and retesting that low down there of around 1427, right in that level, right in there. All right, that doesn't mean we can't explode to the upside. In fact, the market was moving up this morning, and then we got the news on Google. So SPX for the week is definitely still in an upcycle. Looking at Friday, we're looking for a potential pivot and return to a down cycle in this in this sideways trending market that gave us potentially, we'll see what the wording looks like tomorrow, a lower high than we had back here about 2 weeks ago. So with that, the SPX today had a bit of a not so bullish day as we're looking at a potential pivot. Let's take a look at the Dow and see what happened with the Dow. Looking at that, we see that also had what we call a doji, and so we ended up with that doji, and we see that there was indecision in the market, but we did not have a lower high with the Dow. We had a higher high and a higher low still continuing in that upcycle on the Dow, as we saw the Dow hold up better than the S&P actually did on Thursday. What will Friday bring us? Well, if the overall market pulls back, so will the Dow, and we did not reach that previous high of the trading range. So we're kind of in the same situation here. Watch carefully that first hour tomorrow morning and see what the Dow does, what the S&P does. You'll have an indication of where the market's going to close the week as we come into the TGIF. Now let's take a look at the NASDAQ, and we see the NASDAQ didn't have any hesitation. The NASDAQ did have Google. The NASDAQ did have Apple, and look what that looked like. It looked like a definite pivot, and we see that we are in a downward trend and a downward trading range on the NASDAQ, as we're showing more weakness in this market than we did in the other two markets we've already looked at. And finally, looking at the rut, let's see, we have kind of that same concept there, where with the rut, we were in this downward cycle heading down further and further as we're getting lower highs, looking at this, looking there, and we're getting lower lows as we look there horizontally. And so we see we're in a downward trend in the Russell as we bounced well below the 50-day moving average in that recent pullback. Russell showing more weakness in the overall markets. Many times the Russell will give us indications of where the market is actually going. All right, looking at the VIX, we see the VIX. What's this? The market pulled back today, but the VIX ended up down only 4 cents. Oh, we could have expected more than that out of the VIX. Should have expected a little more fear out of the VIX, expecting that to go a little bit higher today. Not much volatility in the market, and doesn't seem to be a whole lot of fear there. Kind of a contradiction there in the VIX as we looked at Thursday. Looking at bonds, we had a market that looked like it was going to be pulling back. Look at this. The bonds are still pulling back. We have that weird time of the year that can happen now and then where the bonds and the stock market can pull back at the same time. That can happen in September or October. And we're in that time going into this president election. Not sure exactly who's going to get elected president as we see this thing going nose to nose right into the election. And finally, we saw the financials, which had a better day than the overall markets did, as we saw a higher high, a higher low, and the first 4 days of the week, us heading up towards that previous high on the XLF. Watch for the air to get a little thin up here, and looking for this to roll over, and you have potential to make money on the upside. Notice your target will be that 30-day moving average as we see that it's been bounce off that 30-day moving average as we see it acting as good support for XLF. It'll take a much bigger pullback in the major markets to see the XLF pull back as it seems to be leading the market up. Finally, taking a look at oil, we see that the oil basically had a lower high, lower low today. And so oil kind of floundering in this trading range that has a high at about 34.50 and a low of about 32.50. Potential here for one of your favorite I'm going no place strategies, looking at potential condors on this as the air is getting a little thin up there for oil, looking at USO as our indicator for oil. And looking at gold, what did the haven for safety to do as the market began to pull back? Gold went down. Not exactly what we would expect. Getting very mixed signals out of the markets today as we're seeing a lot of diversity from what we would consider to be normal trends. And with that today, what did we really end up doing as far as volume in the spider? What kind of commitment was there? Quite a bit. Stronger than we've had all week as we looked at Thursday, and we see that we ended up with the SPY giving us that doji, and it do it on a decent volume of 148 million shares. So with that, we're seeing some real indecision as we looks like we may have hit a top here, and we'll see what Friday holds for us as we go into Friday morning with not a whole lot there in economic announcements at Friday to move the market. We'll see. Watch your futures and watch that first hour to give you an indication of where the market's going on Friday. So with that, for those of you that are gold members, hang around. We'll look at our stocks, see how Apple did in our Apple economy, and see how Google did and Priceline and so on and so forth. As we saw a day that we might have had a topping signal, have not yet had confirmation. For those of you that would like to see more free videos, go to www.optionsuniversity.com/free gold. And here we are Friday morning. This is Butch Shorak Options University. It's October 19th, 2012, and I thank you very much for being here.